I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. I want to focus our attention with this thought in mind. I've got plans. I've got plans. I've got plans. If you say it just so that it can seep into the corridors of your spiritual life and your mind and let it sip into you. I've got plans. I've got plans. These oh so familiar words of Scripture have served as the soothing comfort and release from incredible circumstances. They become a tool when we are confronted with what seems to be insurmountable tragedy. We extract from this ancient score the antidote for anxiety, hopelessness, and loneliness. Scribed in this letter from the weeping prophet himself, Jeremiah, we find these prophetic promises. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Lord, I heard once that people come to the church and they come because they're dealing with life circumstances, and the preacher ought to preach as if their life depended on it. God, speak to me in this moment, because somebody's here who needs a word. Somebody needs to be encouraged. Jesus, we got to go 0 to 100 real quick. We've got to press our way. Help me now, God, to speak and proclaim your word. Hide me behind the cross, oh God, and enter this place as you already are. Amen. Jerusalem, the people of Jerusalem, and its country itself became a place of decadence, debauchery, corruption. It was the hub for the hungover. It was the land of the liar, the town of terror. Sin ran rapid, and the practice of worshiping false gods was the order of the land. They were in a place of desolation, isolation, and God was so fed up that he sent his prophet Jeremiah. And he sends Jeremiah to warn Jerusalem of the inevitable wrath of the Creator. Those who turned from their wicked ways were sent to Babylon exile. And by consequence, God says, you know what? I'm sending these people out of this circumstance. I'm taking them out of where they're at, and I'm going to put them in an unfamiliar circumstance. I'm sending them to exile. Jeremiah, you go, and you tell them that I have a plan for them. You tell them that whatever the circumstance they're faced with is not to take them out. You tell them that I've got them wrapped up, that they're going to be fine, but you tell them that I have a plan. And as I read these scriptures and I read these words, I found problems because I said, God, you are saying to them that I have a plan for you. The problem is, God, you sent Jeremiah for 20-something years to speak about destruction. Jeremiah came to Jerusalem to talk about all of the wrong things that were going on. He was sent to warn the people, if y'all don't get your act together, God is going to tear this city upside down. There is no rescue. There is no warning. There is no chance of you surviving what I'm about to do. I am sick and tired of dealing with you and your mess. Jeremiah pleads back and forth to God. God, don't send these people away. Don't destroy them. God says, I don't care what you have to say. You don't know what they're doing, so I'm sending you, and the only thing that you need to do is profess and proclaim what it is that I'm about to do in this place. He writes this letter to these people, and he says, I have a plan for you. And I found that very problematic because, God, how is it that you sent me out of the place that I love? You sent this prophet to profess this destructive, this declarative, this prophetic word, and out of the mouth of Jeremiah himself cries out, God, why is it that everything I say destructive? I mean, God, how do you have plans for me when you sent somebody to tell my family that he's going to kill them? What kind of a plan is that, God? looking at me, I'm looking back at you, and we're saying, what is he going to say next? And I'm thinking, what are they going to respond to next? And as I delve into the text, I recognize, wait a minute, we don't deal with exile, because that is a very arbitrary, very abstract theme of exile. We're in Morehouse Chapel right now. There's no exile that we're dealing with on the surface, but if you recall the circumstances of your life, there are exiles that we're in right now. This is a hub. Many of us deal with the destruction of our family. We deal with the marriage problem between mom and daddy. When they can't get their stuff together, they confuse the children on what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. How do you relate to your relationship with your girlfriend or your boyfriend? How do you deal with life circumstances when you're at home, when your cousin's on crack, but you're the one in college and you're doing right, and everybody that you love is doing horrible, but God has you in exile. He's saying, I have a plan for you, but them I'm going to destroy. How is it that God, you have a plan for me, but not my family? How is it that these circumstances that I left, I have to still deal with? How is it that you have a plan? There doesn't seem to be any kind of a plan in sight, God. And he says, wait a minute. God says, wait a minute. I'm the one who brought you out of exile. I'm the one who brought you into exile. I'm the one who got you out of the circumstances you were in. When your friends turned your back on you, when the world turned your back on you, when they started killing the Trayvons, and when they started messing with the justice system and everything was going awry, I'm the one that brought you out. I brought you into safe captivity. I brought you into the place of peace and the place of prosperity. I did that, so when I declare that I have a plan for you, know that I have a plan for you. I didn't say I had a plan for them, I have a plan for you. And it reminds me of this story, a Buddhist monk by the name of Thich Nhat Hanh. He was a peace activist. He was an author in the 60s, wrote over 100 and so books, and he was opposed to the Vietnam War, so much so that in 1967, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize, and as a result, North and South Vietnam exiled him for 39 years. He couldn't go back to his country. And I thought it very peculiar that this Buddhist monk, who was fighting for the ideals of peace and of calmness and of justice, would be exiled from his own country. And I thought, what an incredible circumstance. So Thich Nhat Hanh in his exile started building. You see, when you got plans, when God has a plan, you have to start building. If I had time, I'd go into verse 8 at the last sentence of verse 8, and God says to them, he says, increase in number, do not decrease. Also, seek the peace and prosperity of the city which I have carried you to exile. You see, Han understood this principle clearly, and he says that he created the Plum Village Buddhist monastery in spite of the circumstance. And today the monastery's focus is of mindful living, to understand who you are as a person. And the monastery now welcomes 45,000 people who participate in his own movement. And I thought to myself, how peculiar that is, that in his own exile from his own country, a Buddhist monk found himself in face with the king. What an incredible story today. That in spite of the circumstances, the text is not just about Jerusalem. It's not just about those people, but a real application that God can send a Buddhist monk and have 45,000 people follow him in prosperity. Okay. But God also says, I have plans to prosper you and not harm you. Well, I found that problematic. Because God, you said you're not going to harm me. And you said you'd prosper me. But the only folks that are not being harmed right now is me, and I have to see my folks dying every day. Wow. God, it seems to be that even though I'm in King's Chapel, I'm awaiting a verdict to hit, God. God, it seems to be that in society, yes, you have me. All right, I'm not the one being shot, but God, it's not fair that it just seems like there's some harm everywhere else, not to harm me, so I don't get what you're saying, God. You got to speak to me. He said, keep on reading. Keep on reading. I know I'm out of time, but he said, keep on reading the text. He says, plans to give you hope in the future. So as I tried to ponder this idea of hope, What kind of hope is there in the face of peril? What do I do when I can't affect the legislation? What do I do when I can't arrest the officer myself? What do I do when I'm faced with circumstances that I can't touch? What do you do? And God said, wait a minute. Did you not hear Maya Angelou? Maya Angelou's son wrote, we delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit the change it has gone through to achieve that beauty. He says, son, Maya was saying that I'm trying to make you to be a butterfly. And the interesting thing is I make my clothes as a butterfly has a caterpillar has an interesting metamorphosis that happens. A caterpillar will stuff itself. A caterpillar will blow itself up, essentially. Okay. You're not a caterpillar, so when life gets jacked up and you have a lot of negativity stuffed inside of you, when folks push society's agenda down your throat and you're dealing with issues at home, when you're dealing with scholarship problems, and you're dealing with, I don't know, my identity, when you're dealing with an identity crisis, when you're dealing with financial issues, you just become stuck with issues you cannot control. You're stuck, just like the caterpillar, and all of a sudden you say, you know what, I'm done. The caterpillar stops eating. This is the point where you say, I've had enough. And it seems as if everything is going topsy-turvy. The caterpillar, when it stops eating, it hangs upside down. Have you ever found yourself in a circumstance when your world is turned upside down? When you're dealing with issues and you have no idea where God is, and it just seems like everything you told me you wouldn't do, you're doing. God, I don't get what's going on. My life is upside down, and then all of a sudden, everything around you that you're trying to control starts hovering around you, and it starts consuming you. And so just as the caterpillar spins itself into silk, the negativity of the world just seems to consume you. But all of a sudden, if you wait, if you hold still, a butterfly emerges. And isn't it interesting, Donald, that in the muck, in the mire, in the dark life circumstances, the beautiful things of life emerge? And I asked God the question, what kind of hope are you talking about? And he says, son, chill out for a minute. Even though the verdict is coming, are you not in school? Are you not equipping yourself? Are you not in your own cocoon state? Have you not taken up your mantle? Have you not carried your cross every day? This is what I'm telling you, that the hope is in you. Maya Angelou puts it another way. I think it's kind of ironic that we're on the same page with her. She says, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I am the hope. So as I move to my clothes and I take my seat, the only thing that I'm trying to tell you is that God is saying to you, I've got plans. So when you're faced with adversity, when you're faced with circumstance, tell your situation, I don't care what it looks like. I don't care if I'm in exile. I don't care what I'm going through, because I've got plans.
We invite you to join the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel Assistants every Sunday at 5:30 p.m. for services in King Chapel. Gather with us on Thursdays at 5:30 p.m. for Theological Table Talk in the Lucian Tobin Library. Till we gather again, God be with you.